Tonight on Reporting Scotland, the neurosurgeon who harmed dozens of patients and was allowed to continue to operate.
To allow him to perform another complex operation, it's unthinkable. It's not acceptable.
Also coming up on the programme, Celtic apologises for these scenes at its ground, which left fans injured. A former trader who committed the biggest fraud in British history is detained in Scotland and due to be deported. Calls for tougher punishments for criminals who target older people. And in football, Scotland gets a new captain ahead of a friendly against Belgium. Good evening. A leading surgeon was allowed to harm patients for years because a health board didn't have the systems in place to pick up on his mistakes. An investigation by BBC Scotland's Disclosure team found the former head of neurosurgery at NHS Tayside was allowed to continue operating even after an external investigation found he was injuring patients. The health board says it has changed its practices as a result. With the story, our correspondent Lucy Adams.
Jules Rose was a keen marathon runner, but in 2013 she was told she had a brain tumour. She was nervous but reassured because her surgeon was Mr. Sam Elgemel, the head of department.
With the aid of the computer, we will be able to localize...
His work had even featured on the BBC. In the August, she had surgery. She was told by Mr. Elgemel that it had gone well.
I remember he had a big smile on his face and he says, 99% removed. And I said, thank you. Just thank you.
But there was bad news. The surgery would have to be done again.
I think the worst thing for me was having to go back and tell my two daughters that I was going back in for surgery.
But later, she found out the explanation she'd been given for the second operation wasn't true. Her notes show that in the first operation, he'd removed her tear gland instead of her tumour.
It's atrocious for NHS Tayside to allow this surgeon, who had blatantly made a mistake the first time, to allow him to perform another complex operation. It's unthinkable. It's not acceptable.
In June 2013, NHS Tayside had asked the Royal College to investigate Mr. Elgemel. The health board says it acted immediately to suspend Mr. Elgemel after it received their report. But that's not true. We know NHS Tayside allowed Mr. Elgemel to operate on Jules Rose 3 days after the report was sent. We've discovered she's one of at least 55 patients who've complained after surgery by Mr. Elgemel. We asked an expert neurosurgeon to review some of their records. In one case, he found Mr. Elgemel had overstated the operation's chances of success. In two others, he believes the surgery wasn't done.
Well, that was negligent. There's no other description. It's completely unacceptable. It's dishonest.
We've also obtained internal documents showing that NHS Tayside didn't have the systems in place to pick up on recurrent mistakes.
Highly, highly unusual for such a prominent and established surgeon to make so many surgical errors. This is not just a case of a bad day at the office.
And the Royal College of Surgeons' review is damning.
It talks about a surgeon who failed to supervise his trainees, who regularly got his juniors to do his operations for him and who rushed surgery. It says he was often difficult to get hold of because he was busy doing private work, and some of his colleagues had complained he'd bullied them.
I want to find Mr. Elgemel to ask him some questions, but where is he? We've been looking for Mr. Elgemel for months, but he's been really hard to find. We think he might now be living in America, so we've come here to track him down.
Dial the numeral
His name's on the buzzer, but it seems he's not here now.
This is the recording.
So we tracked down every property linked to him.
I was looking for Mr. Sam El-Jamel. I was trying to find a relative of yours, Mr. Sam El-Jamel.
I know him, but I don't know where he is.
But we can't find him. Neighbours say he's vanished. For now, we can't get Mr. El-Jamel to explain why he's done what he has. His lawyer says he has no comment to make. So what are the repercussions for Mr. El-Jamel? He's been allowed to deregister himself and simply walk away. NHS Tayside told us it has listened to patients' concerns and taken appropriate action to support them. It said there has been much learning by the organisation and many improvements made. But for patients like Jules Rose, that's not good enough. Lucy Adams, reporting Scotland.
And the full programme, Harmed by My Surgeon, can be seen on BBC One Scotland tonight at 7:30. Celtic have apologised to fans caught up in a crush outside the club's stadium. One person was taken to hospital and 5 more were injured before Sunday's match against Rangers after stadium access points were changed. Some supporters were forced to climb over a fence to escape the overcrowding. Katrina Renton reports.
This was the situation some Celtic fans found themselves in just before yesterday's match started.
There's crowds of people there trying to turn round to get back out again, and the police here are pushing people in.
Jamie Kerr and his friend were among them.
Couldn't move forward, we couldn't move back. It was so crammed you couldn't move your hands up. It was actually very, very frightening. There were kids crying, and the real problem was that more people were still coming in. The police were still directing and putting people into the tunnel at that point.
One person was taken to hospital after falling from a wall. 4 others were treated at the scene for their injuries.
I think, looking back, that could have been a disaster with very serious injuries. I think there could have been deaths there, in my view, from inside the tunnel. I felt lucky to get out of it.
Police had earlier cordoned off a section of one of the roads at the stadium to allow Rangers' 800 fans access, forcing more home supporters than usual to use the North Stand's entry point.
It absolutely is Police Scotland's fault for not anticipating this, for not dealing with it as it unfolded, and on a more broader basis, it is absolutely Police Scotland's. The issue is Police Scotland's attitude to football fans, and it has to change.
In a statement, Chief Superintendent Brian McAnulty of Police Scotland said tomorrow he will be meeting with representatives of Celtic Football Club and the other emergency services. The response to the overcrowding was in line with tried and tested plans involving stewards, police officers on foot and mounted officers. This Glasgow MSP wants answers.
This ground regularly hosts 60,000 capacity crowds. We've never seen an incident like this outside the ground, so why did it happen yesterday? Very worrying indeed.
In a statement, Celtic said that they sincerely regret and apologise that so many fans were faced with this situation. They say the safety of their fans will always be of paramount importance and are working along with Police Scotland to investigate this matter fully, to identify the causes and to ensure that appropriate steps are taken that this does not happen again at Celtic Park.
I would usually come with my dad and my son, he's 6, but after that I would really think twice about bringing my young boy to a football match here.
Katrina Renton, reporting Scotland, Glasgow.
The First Minister says Brexit uncertainty is leading to increased support for Scottish independence. Nicola Sturgeon was speaking as she prepared to set out her government's plans for the year ahead, which is launched tomorrow. But opposition leaders say the administration she leads is tired and out of touch. This from our political editor, Brian Taylor.
Political leaders like to exude certainty, but for Nicola Sturgeon, a time of turmoil, internally with Alex Salmond, externally with Brexit. Today she was announcing nearly £17 million for low-carbon investment, including electric vehicles to be used by the Fire and Rescue Service. But always at her heels, the EU, even here on a licence plate. She believes Brexit will be catastrophic and will require maximum mitigation, boosting the sustainable economy.
We see the UK hurtling ever closer to a hard Brexit, perhaps a no-deal Brexit cliff edge. It's hardly surprising that we see a poll today showing a majority of people in Scotland would rather have independence.
And does that tempt you to hold that referendum at an early stage?
I'm going to stick to the timetable that I set out previously. When we get greater clarity around Brexit, I will set out my judgment on the way forward for Scotland.
That survey was conducted by Datapol for groups campaigning for a second EU referendum. Tory leaders say the only realistic option is to back the Prime Minister's stance on Brexit. And they say Nicola Sturgeon should forget independence and focus on the day job. Jackson Carlaw noted that substantial sections of last year's programme for government had yet to be enacted.
We also were told that the major bill, the star of the show last year, was going to be a bill on education, which just before the summer recess the Scottish Government abandoned. This is a tired government. This session of Parliament marks the point where we go into the countdown towards the next Scottish elections. Either this tired government starts to shape up and deliver, or it has to make way for people who can.
The programme for government will be detailed at Holyrood tomorrow, with an expected focus on the economy, mental health and social security.
And Brian joins me, and I think you've got some more details on what we can expect from
I think that mental health one will be fairly significant, given that it's been hugely contentious, Jackie, in the last few weeks and months, with claims that Scotland's mental health provision was falling well short of requirements. I think there'll be extra money for that. Of course, it will depend upon how that is deployed and how that is spent. We have to look at the economy as well at the same time. Nicola Sturgeon will suggest tomorrow that you're looking at investment in the infrastructure to enhance Scotland's economy more generally, to mitigate, as she sees it, the downside of Brexit. Now, as to those Tory complaints about bills being carried forward, yes, say the Scottish Government, there are a dozen bills being carried forward from last year, but they say that is entirely routine and standard, given the nature of the Scottish Parliament that believes in substantial public consultation, not a sign, they say, of drift.
And good news today, though, for the SNP as a party.
It is. I mean, they're being accused of slipping in drift, and what they've done is they've slipped ahead of the Conservatives in terms of party membership. And I should stress that's not in Scotland. The SNP membership, which of course is predominantly in Scotland, is now bigger than the Conservative membership for the whole of Great Britain. The Tories say, OK, fine, good luck to them with their recruitment campaign, but they say that doesn't address the concerns that they have about the governance of Scotland and the handling of Scotland by Nicola Sturgeon and her Scottish Government.
Brian Taylor, thank you. Detectives investigating a sexual assault in a Glasgow park have released a description of the suspect. A 29-year-old woman was attacked in Kelvingrove Park just after 1:30 yesterday morning by a man she had met earlier in the night. He's described as aged between 20 to 25, of medium build with long dark hair. He was wearing a white top under a dark bomber-style jacket. Police are also keen to speak to a woman who came to the victim's aid on North Claremont Street. Well, it's just after 20 to 7. A reminder now of tonight's main story. A neurosurgeon who harmed dozens of his patients and was allowed to continue to operate. And still to come, Liverpool's Andy Robertson has been named as the Scotland captain, replacing retiring skipper Scott Brown. The man convicted of the biggest fraud in British history has been detained at Dungavel Detention Centre and is due to be deported to Ghana. Kweku Aduboli is fighting the Home Office decision, saying he's lived in Britain since he was 12. Earlier, our business and economy editor, Douglas Fraser, spoke to him at his home in West Lothian.
Guilty of Britain's biggest ever fraud, more than £1.5 billion. Kweku Aduboli was the 31-year-old who nearly sank the giant Swiss bank UBS. He was jailed for half of a 7-year sentence and has since been fighting deportation. He has a passport from Ghana, but has lived in Britain since coming to school in Yorkshire aged 12. On Friday, at his home in Livingston, where he lives with friends from university days, he told me his story and his version of being the last man standing when the financial music stopped.
Whenever we need to ostracize someone, it's the person that's different to us that we ostracize. The fact that I was born in a different country and I have different color skin became part of the labeling process. You know, it was Ghanaian-born rogue trader Aduboli, right? This ostracization process, that is racism. The deportation process that now follows is racism.
To the Home Office, however, his time is up. In a statement today, it said, all foreign nationals who are given a custodial sentence will be considered for removal. Foreign nationals who abuse our hospitality by committing crimes in the UK should be in no doubt of our determination to deport them, and we have removed more than 42,800 foreign offenders since 2010.
The idea behind deportation of offenders is to remove those who pose a threat to the community, a risk of harm. So I understand the goal and I understand how the law is framed. The problem is that in its execution, it causes more harm than good. You can brag about deporting 42,800 foreign national offenders, but what have you really done? If those people were born here or grew up here from an early age, what you've actually done is you've destroyed 42,800 families.
You had a pretty good chance. You had a very privileged education through university course, straight into the heart of the most lucrative, prestigious sector in the British economy, and you blew it. You know, you did a lot of damage. Can you understand then why the Home Office and quite a lot of people support the Home Office and this will think that you've blown it in Britain as well? You've had your chance, your time should be up.
What is this, the lottery of life? Deportation isn't supposed to be a double punishment. I've served my time as a model prisoner. I've spent the time since doing everything I can to contribute in a positive way to our society, doing work that very few others, if anyone, can do because the experience I've had is so unique. But more importantly, this is a human story. I came here as a child without my own family and created a surrogate family, and that the friends and family that have developed in the 26 years since I first came here as a child are my family. And if you deport me, just on a personal level, what you're doing is you are violently tearing away this huge part of me that's central to my identity. And you are banishing me from the United Kingdom and the rest of the Western world for life. That's what deportation actually is.
Kweku Adeboli there, detained today and facing deportation. And there's more from that interview on Good Morning Scotland on Radio Scotland. Abuse of the elderly should be taken as seriously as child abuse. That's the call from a charity which wants a change in the law, which would mean tougher punishments for those who commit crimes against older, vulnerable people. It claims around 100,000 older people suffer some form of abuse each year, covering physical, psychological, sexual or financial crimes. Katie Hunter reports.
Betty Lynch had cerebral palsy and bone cancer. She died not knowing her carer had stolen more than £40,000 from her.
My aunt probably, if we had told my aunt...
Betty's niece, Lynn Harrison, suspected something was wrong and spent almost 3 years seeking justice for her aunt.
Obviously there was a massive shock and anger, but betrayal, and it wasn't even so much the money that she took from my aunt, which was horrific. It was the trust and the love that she stole from her in the last 3 years of her life. That's hard to accept. When I heard this, I was appalled.
Lynn told her story at a national conference today. The charity Action on Elder Abuse wants Scotland to become the first country in the UK to make abuse of older, vulnerable people a statutory aggravating offence. That would mean stiffer punishments for perpetrators.
Of those that do get treated seriously by the police, very few actually go to the courts, and of the ones that actually progress to courts, there's far too many cases of deferred sentences, community service or fines rather than a custodial sentence. And for us that just sends a message that if there's no effective prosecution, then people will carry on doing this because they think that there's no punishment.
I'm making more than 20 recommendations in all.
The charity says a report by a retired judge earlier this year paves the way for change. Lord Bracadale recommended the country's hate crime legislation should be expanded to cover offences aggravated by somebody's age. Scottish ministers say they're listening.
It's definitely something the Scottish Government's looking at. That's why I'm here today. That's why we now have a Minister for Older People to put that focus on this issue and how we can make sure that Scotland is that fairer, more protected place, especially for people who are vulnerable, our older people.
Betty's carer was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Her family hope criminals who target older people in future will receive harsher punishments. Katie Hunter, reporting Scotland.
TSB has apologised to customers who faced disruption to their online and mobile banking over the weekend. The bank didn't say how many customers were affected, but 1.9 million people use its digital banking services. TSB is still recovering from an IT fiasco in April when customers were left without access to online banking for several weeks. The bank said that its systems returned to normal earlier today. Scots involved in the miners' strike are being urged to share their experiences with a panel that's reviewing the impact of policing during the dispute. The protests in the mid-80s included violent clashes between police and striking miners. The QC leading the independent review says although it happened 3 decades ago, he's aware strong feelings persist. He wants to hear the experiences of anyone involved, including those in mining communities and police officers. An airline is creating 300 jobs in Scotland after announcing expansion plans at 2 airports. Jet2.com and Jet2 Holidays is increasing capacity at Glasgow and Edinburgh's terminals next summer with more than 1.7 million seats in total. It's also launching new destinations to Bulgaria from Glasgow and Edinburgh and Izmir in Turkey from Glasgow. More than 150 cabin crew and 100 ground operation staff will be recruited, along with pilots. Sport now, and Andy Robertson says he's absolutely delighted to be named Scotland captain. The Liverpool player replaces Scott Brown as skipper after he retired at the end of the last qualifying campaign. His first game as captain will be against the second best team in the world when Scotland face Belgium in a friendly on Friday. Here's Jane Lewis.
Not quite the full complement of players being put through their paces today. Almost all of those involved in games yesterday excused from training. But among those who were present, the new Scotland captain. Liverpool left-back Andy Robertson will wear the skipper's armband for the foreseeable future.
He's had to work hard, he's done it the hard way. You know, from where he's come from to get to here now is incredible. For young kids that are playing football, any walk of life, you have a setback, it's not the end. And certainly he's playing at a ridiculous level for club. And the games he's played for us, he's been outstanding. He was an outstanding candidate and I'm absolutely delighted for him. I think he deserves it.
While Robertson's Scotland place is assured,
Lee Griffiths has been called upon.
This player is hoping to get the nod despite not being a regular for Celtic this season.
That's my main aim. Obviously it's hard when you're not playing for Celtic, but when you do get the chance you need to take it, and obviously when you get called up it's a great honour, but you need to show everybody what you can do, especially the new manager coming in.
Naismith with a chance to secure a hat-trick.
And the main competition in the striking department might just come from Stephen Naismith, called up into the squad today, fresh from his weekend hat-trick.
The other spot in the starting lineup which could be giving the Scotland coaching staff a selection headache is that of the goalkeepers, with Celtic's Craig Gordon and Alan McGregor of Rangers battling it out for the #1 jersey.
That is going to be a massive dilemma. I think Alan McGregor's started really well at Rangers and he's been a great signing for them. Craig Gordon, I've played with the both of them for years, a number of years. I know what they're like, and it will be a very difficult decision, but whoever we go with, we'll be more than happy with.
So decisions to be made, with Belgium, the second best team in the world, sure to provide a stiff test for Alex McLeish's men. Jane Lewis, reporting Scotland.
Well, let's get a look at the weather now. And I've been hearing today, what is it, the hottest year ever for England, but not so here.
Apparently, yes. No, not here in Scotland, but we didn't do too badly.
We did not.
And actually, yesterday, I think we saw 24 Celsius up towards the Moray Firth. So
lucky
not today, though. Lucky old Moray. A very good evening to you. It was a bit of an all-or-nothing day. As you can see behind me, it was rather wet there in St Andrews. Eastern Scotland saw grey skies, outbreaks of rain, but glorious sunshine across western parts. Look at this lovely blue skies in Argyll. And you can see this from the earlier satellite picture, the bank of cloud. It's a weather front lying across the east and the south, but in the west it was almost wall-to-wall sunshine. That will continue to be the case this evening. Cloudy, some bits and pieces of rain towards eastern areas, mainly the east coast actually. Elsewhere it's dry, late sunshine, and the dry conditions hold overnight as well. Lengthy clear spells away from that east coast, and we could see a wee touch of frost as well, the likes of Grampian and up towards the North Highland. Quite cold everywhere though, 6 or 7 Celsius in our towns and cities. And we could see 1 or 2 mist patches forming before dawn tomorrow, so that could be the case first thing. Plenty of sunshine away from the east coast tomorrow. A chilly start to the day. Any mist or fog will clear away, so it will be quite a cold start really everywhere. But come the afternoon, light and variable wind over the Northern Isles. A very pleasant day indeed. Plenty of sunshine here. Again, that bank of clouds is gripping eastern coastal areas. But come inland, plenty of sunshine. There'll be some fair weather cloud bubbling up, but generally the picture across the country will be dry. 17 Celsius for Glasgow, and for the west coast, the potential for 1 or 2 showers for the Western Isles, but generally it's a dry picture. Plenty of sunshine up towards the northwest Highlands, just more cloud pushing into the Western Isles, and winds again light pretty much across the board. Into tomorrow evening, we hold on to the dry conditions, some late sunshine. Eventually we'll lose that cloud from the southeast, so it will be another chilly one as we head through the overnight. Let's look at the pressure chart. High pressure just about holding on for Wednesday to start with, before this weather frontier starts to move into the far northwest. This front will eventually bring rain, but a dry, bright start, some sunshine for eastern Scotland, cloud building all the while in the west, and we will see outbreaks of rain gradually extending here. Stay dry for the northeast and sunny for the Northern Isles, highs of 16 or 17 Celsius. And that's your forecast. Jackie.
Thank you very much, Judith. And now just time for a reminder of tonight's main news. A leading surgeon was allowed to harm patients for years because a health board didn't have the systems in place to pick up his mistakes. A BBC Scotland investigation found the former head of neurosurgery at NHS Tayside was allowed to continue operating even after an external investigation found he was injuring patients. The health board says it has since changed its practices. And that is Reporting Scotland for now. I will, of course, be back with the late bulletin, which is at 10:30. Until then, from everyone on the team across the country, bye-bye.